Good afternoon, everyone. This is Kim Schmidt, Executive Editor of Farm Equipment Magazine. Welcome to our latest webinar, Let's Move Some Iron, in conjunction with Western Equipment Dealers Association. Today's webinar is focused on sales and motivating your sales team. Today's presenter is Trent Hummel, who's a trainer and consultant with WIDA. His 25 plus years as both a dealership owner and general manager have provided him with invaluable experience and extensive knowledge in managing and leading dealership operations. Before Trent gets started with the presentation, I've got a couple of housekeeping items. On your screen, there's a control panel with a Q&A icon. You can submit questions here at any time during the presentation, and time permitting, we'll look to answer as many questions as possible following Trent's presentation. If for any reason your internet connection or even our connection should happen to fail at some point and it looks like the webinar has been interrupted, just go back to the email you received earlier telling you how to join the webinar, and you can re-enter that way. Okay, we are ready to get started. Thanks again for joining us, and take it away, Trent.
Okay, thanks everybody for having us and joining us this afternoon. And as Kim said, let's get her going. It's 1 o'clock, 1 o'clock in Mountain Time Zone anyways. Now, just to clear up some language I use, and I like to go over this quite a bit, buying iron, that's how I always phrase when we're taking trades, because yesterday we used to say book and trade value and stuff, and tomorrow or going forward, we should always use the word buy or pay, because that's what we're actually doing when we're buying used iron or taking trades, is we're putting a value on it to buy it, to resell it. When you start using that kind of terminology with your salesman or with all your staff, you know, what did we buy this for? What are we going to pay for that piece? It puts a little more understanding or onus on what you're actually doing as a dealership. We're taking trades. We're buying this used equipment to resell. We're not just taking trades because we want to sell new iron. Next, please. So I use that terminology all the time, buying iron, paying for it. And a deal is two deals, which a lot of people get confused on this. Every deal is two deals. You're selling the new deal, the new piece to the buyer, and you're buying a used yourself. So you're actually buying a piece right back. And that's what a lot of salesmen get confused on. We're not taking trades. We're buying iron to resell it. So every deal is two deals. He's a seller and a buyer at the same time, which really creates a conflicting situation for most salesmen because they're so excited to get that first one done. They sometimes get rose-colored glasses on that trade and maybe allow a little too much if they don't have somebody to really backstop them and say we're not paying that much. Go ahead. Next. Okay, so how do we get these guys engaged to act in the best interest of themselves and the whole goods department? I mean, they got to be motivated, they got to be interested, and we got to have them engaged. And when they're like that, life is a lot easier for a sales manager, for an organization, for the whole department, for everybody. And this isn't just the sales department, it's every department needs this kind of engagement in order to move the store ahead. Next, please. So are they engaged? Have you ever ranked your people? You know, rank them and see how engaged they are. There's little questionnaires that you can do with them to see if they're motivated in their jobs, if they enjoy their jobs, if they enjoy working for their company. You know, are they sitting around on Sunday afternoon? Are they watching the football game or goofing off? Or are they thinking about what they need to do on Monday? Because Sunday nights, you know, are they feeling drained that they have to go into work on Monday? Or are they excited because they've thought of stuff for all weekend that they want to get done, and finally Monday's coming and they can get in to go to work and get stuff going? Now, where are your people at? That's a huge question you ask yourself, and as salesmen especially, because they should never shut off. Their head should be a sales head all the time in order to be engaged. That's their career and their job. You know, I can appreciate that maybe a service technician goes home, and he might not think about work, but you know he does, because he's worked on a job or he was on a customer call, you know, and he did a job and he's thinking, maybe I could have done that a little faster, a little better. And he starts talking to other techs while they're watching the football game on Sunday afternoon, and he starts to learn a little bit more, maybe how he could have done his job a little better. But are they doing that, or are they just saying, I don't want to talk about work, I don't want to think about that place, I don't want to go near it, I don't want anything, I'm just dreading that Monday's coming around? Next. So which are you? Why are these people behaving that they're not engaged? You know, are you a boss where employees are doing their jobs because they're told to, or are you a leader, you know, where they're doing their jobs because they believe in the organization, what the organization is working towards? And that's a big difference there. And we've run across, you know, at the Western Equipment Dealers Association with a lot of these dealerships, we run across a lot of people that think they're a leader, but they're actually a boss, especially when we do an evaluation with their people. the boss will, the owner, the manager will check off, you know, he'll go down the list and he'll mark off that he's a leader in the evaluation. But when it comes to the employees doing it, they'll always mark him down as a boss. So he's not behaving in the best interest of the employees. He's just behaving in, this is what I want done, and this is why I want it done, and this is what you'll do it because I pay you to come in and do it. And yeah, there is some of that, you know, there is some of that that has to be done, but it's sure a lot easier when they're engaged. And I'm not sure, each has their own style. Each of us has our own style, how to get people engaged. Some follow because they like you, some follow because they believe in you. And it's the perception of the employees on a manager is a lot more important than the perception of the manager on himself. Next, please. So what makes the best to being the best manager? Winners work for winners, and Steve Jobs said it best. A players will work with others. There's a lot of thought in the business world years ago that A players didn't want to play with anybody else, but Steve Jobs summed it up and said they'll play with other people. A players want to play with A players. They just don't want to play with any C's. They get tired of playing with the losers or the guys that aren't engaged. It just drains on them. But there's the best traits of a manager are the 10 core values of a business, but these ones on the screen are the most important. Organizational skills, communication skills, and rational behaviors, making logical business decisions. The number one thing that ticks off employees is an illogical business decision by management. It drives employees nuts. And some of these guys, yeah, they might not be in a leadership role or in a management role, but they've been around business long enough to know when a smart decision's being made and a poor decision's being made. And when a poor one's being made or an illogical one that's not going to move the business forward, it just grinds on them and they lose their engagement. It cuts into the culture. It cuts into everything in your business. Now, I will say this, there is some tough, ugly decisions that have to be made by managers in these businesses that maybe the employees don't understand all the time. And we have to make them for the benefit of the business, but we've done a poor job at explaining to the employees how the business works or what's actually going on behind the scenes. And if we explain that a little better to what's happening, often the employees will come to you and say, you've got to make that decision. It's a bad, ugly decision, but you've got to make it. It makes a logical sense to do that. But they can't do that unless they really understand what's going on in the business. Next, please. Now, why do people stay working for you? Why do you have a high culture or a low culture? Why do they enjoy coming to work? Why do they think about work on a Sunday when they shouldn't be? Why are they coming in early and staying late and not complaining? Number one is acknowledgement for their contribution. Everybody wants to be acknowledged for what they do. Now, acknowledgement is different for each type of behavioral style. Some guys want their acknowledgement, a little picture in the local paper and a little pat on the back, and so the whole town knows that they are doing something right and the business recognizes it. Another quieter person might just want the owner to come in or the boss or the manager to come in the office and say, thank you for doing that. Just look them in the eye and say thank you, and that's as much as they need. So the acknowledgement for contribution, there's different levels of acknowledgement based on what your people, what they need or what their behavioral style likes. Exciting to work for and learning. Is there career growth? Are we working as a manager? Are we training our people for developing their skills? Are we liking what we do? If we like what we do, it's not a job, it's a career, and it's fun and exciting. No one stays where they don't like the people they work with. They peel out of there in a hurry because it's not fun to sit at the lunch table with 5 other guys that don't like you or you don't like them, and you can't even stand being in the same room. I've been in shops where they sit on 5-gallon buckets in all different corners of the shop because the 4 of them don't like each other at all. So they won't have lunch together in a coffee room. They just go sit on these 5-gallon buckets behind the job that they're working on. And that's a terrible thing, because that coffee time or that lunch time when they're sitting there visiting is a great time just to build friendships, but it's also a great time when they discuss maybe jobs that they're on, and a junior guy can then ask a senior guy, hey, I was on this engine job, or I was working on this deal, or whatever it was, and got any advice for a young guy? What should I have done different? And the old guy will mentor him a little, and then you got 3 or 4 old guys in there saying, you could have done this, you could have tried this, you might have worked with this. this customer was yelling at me for this. Well, you might have handled it this way or done this. And there's a lot of great coaching. Coaching doesn't always have to be by a manager. It can be by other senior people in the store. If you add up all the years of all the employees that have worked, there's hundreds of years that have worked in your store and worked in retail or worked with customers in different situations. And they've somewhere along the line, everybody has seen every situation, from that grouchy old crotchety customer to that great customer to that lady whose husband just died and you've got to go out and service that piece, and the funeral was just yesterday. And man, all those situations happen. That's the world we live in. And somebody in your store has had experience with what a junior guy is going to go into. And if you don't have that going in your store, that's where the culture starts, and that's where the engagement starts. Those young guys start to figure out, I am learning. I'm not just learning my role as being a better salesman or being a better technician or whatever it is. I'm learning actually how to do this job, how to work with people, how to work internally with internal customers, external customers. It's a huge one, is relations with your coworkers, because that's where the culture starts. A good culture starts internally and then it spills outwards. Wage and salary, number 1 or number 4 on the list, and I've seen it number 3 on the list. You can spin it however you want, but it's way down there. You give a guy a raise, and the effectiveness of a raise only lasts 7 days. So you got a guy that you're going to lose, so you offer him $1 an hour or more to keep him, but you know what? He was going to quit anyways. That effectiveness, that $1 an hour, he stays motivated for 1 week, and after that, he's right back where he started. There was a reason he didn't like working for you or your department or doing what he's doing. He needed a change. And can you salvage some of those guys? Yeah, but there's a lot of reasons. There's lots more reasons why he's quitting than money. He might throw money at the equation and say, I'm quitting because I'm making more money somewhere else. But really, it's the first 3 on this page why he's leaving. Number 1 reason why people leave an organization is their direct supervisor. So often the direct supervisor is the one that's trying to retain or salvage this employee, and the direct supervisor is the reason the employee is leaving. So often you can't send that direct supervisor in to discuss it, although we always do that because that's who should handle it. So we're sort of shooting ourselves in the foot then, because the employee won't say, I'm leaving because of you, but the number 1 reason people leave an organization is because of his direct supervisor. Next, please. Everybody should do this exercise. You write all your employees down, write all their names down on this piece of paper and rank them. Are they a loyalist? Are they undecided which way they'll go? Or are they just a warm body? And the warm bodies, guys, they're just cancers. They're not on your bus at all. They're the ones causing the trouble. They're the ones that every day of the year, if you could have a replacement walk through the door, you would fire them and hire somebody else that would. Now, the secret is you got 20% loyalists in your organization. How do you get that number up to 40%? And then you start to get some super engagement, because once you got 4 out of 10 people as your loyalists versus 2 out of 10, those undecided guys will really start to swing in that loyalist direction. And once they swing that way, then your store is rolling on its own. You don't have to be the push behind it all the time. And those warm bodies, just get rid of them as fast as you can. And I know guys aren't walking through the door, and I know there isn't many guys to hire, but that's a constant job for everybody, is to go find those people. Now, when you have more people as loyalists and more people that are in the undecided that are leaning towards the loyalist side versus leaning towards the warm body side, those people will attract good people, because like that other slide said, nobody wants to work with the losers. They want to work with the winners. And the winners, it doesn't mean that the winners have to know everything. They just have to know the job that they're hired to do, know it inside out, upside down, and do it well, and put every effort into it. And it doesn't mean they have to know everything. They just have to do the job that they're hired to do. It's the same as playing baseball. You got a first baseman, he needs to play first base, and you got a pitcher that needs to pitch. You need a catcher that needs to catch. You don't ask the first baseman to catch, but he needs to do his job as a first baseman. Same thing. Just get more of those kind of people on your side. So you do that little exercise and rank them and just see where you think you stand, how many loyalists, how many undecided, and how many warm bodies you have. Next, please. Common employee reviews are always top down. They're not, seldom do employees get to rank their managers, which is a terrible mistake. And I'm not sure why. I mean, you've got to be wearing some big boy underwear as a manager when your employees, when they assess you and and it comes back that you thought you were a 10 out of 10 on communication, and they rank you as a 2 out of 10. You got to be able to accept a little criticism and eat some humble pie, and that's okay. That's how we learn. There's no better place to learn how to do your job better than the people that are underneath you that you're doing the job for. But I don't see a lot of employee reviews. When I go into an organization and I ask for these employee reviews, they're all directed one direction. The manager is reviewing the employee. They sign off on it. The employee reviews it. He might add his 2 cents, but he doesn't really get to do a great review on the manager. And I'm not sure why. I've asked lots of managers. They've never thought about it. I've said, are you able to handle that kind of critique? And they said, oh yeah, we'll handle that. We'd like to improve from these people. Now, that's the difference between being a leader and being a boss. A boss says, no way. They don't have to rank me. I am the boss because I'm the boss, and they don't get to say what I am. I'll do what I want to do. So this is a super exercise for you to do. It's really easy to do. I think it should be on annually. We should do it right when we do the employee's assessment. He should be able to do a management assessment. And not that anybody is pointing fingers or calling anybody out. It's just that we want the team we work with to be better, every employee to be better, even your managers. Next, please. If I know the objective of where you want us to go, I will do everything I can to help us hit that objective. Now, this is what we talked about here earlier a little bit. People don't know where you want us to go. Lots of employees I've asked, where does this store want to go in 2 years, 5 years, 1 year, 1 month? And a lot of them say, we have no idea. We're just told to sell more iron. Just sell more iron, and that's the objective. And fair enough, that's an objective, but what's your target? Well, I have no idea. Just sell lots. That's what we get told. If you set out an objective, and an objective is written well, and it's tracked and monitored, passion and emotion is contagious, and it will attract and motivate others. I mean, people will get on board as a team, and then they'll attract other good employees, and people will follow. And even the internal employees that were on the undecided ones, they start to move over to the loyalists because everybody's on the same boat, rowing at the same direction. And it just is, it's a great feeling for a manager to have your team doing that, because you don't have to do it so hard. You don't have to be the push all the time on this stuff. The staff actually, it just grows organically within the place in the way it's going. Next, please. Now, everybody wants to know how they can contribute to the company. People are they're goal-oriented and they're self-motivated if they have a goal to reach for. So the human body, the human nature is that we're goal-oriented. So you set out a goal in front of an employee, and he'll do everything he can to hit that goal if he understands what the goal was. Most employees want to be part or contribute to a winning team. They want to know what they're doing is contributing to the team. So if our goal is to sell more iron and get more iron, or buy more iron right, or whatever the goal is, people will do it if they know what the plan is. Now, how do we get this engagement? You've got it. I've heard dealers call me, they say this is called step it up, or step to engagement, or step on it, or whatever you want to say. But share the numbers, you train and explain the numbers, you empower people, and then you pay them on their results. That's the STEP program. But step on it is what I've seen a number of dealers use that in reference to this. We're going to step on it and speed up this this employee's understanding of the business. So that's where that comes from. Next, please. Next, please. So sharing the books. I mean, who do we share? What do we share? When do we share it? Why do we share it? There's no right answer. There's no easy answer to this. I don't know, because I don't know your organization, and I don't know the depth of your people, and I don't know the depth of your managers. I don't know the depth of your accounting system. So there is no right or wrong to this, or no easy answer to this one. But you got to start with something. Now, what metrics do they need to see? In what detail they need to see it? What do they already know? What do we assume they know that they don't know? What don't we want them to know? There's some metrics that maybe we don't need to show them. Who should be involved? You know, is it only the department manager? Is it department manager and his team? Often I like to do my parts and service, when I'm sharing the books, I have parts and service managers together, or I'll have a parts manager in with the whole service team, and I'll have, when it's a parts department evaluation or sharing the books, I'll have the service manager in with me, and I might have the whole goods manager in with me. But somebody from other departments got to be in there, because it's okay for them to understand what's going on in the other department. They don't have to be an expert. They just need to understand what their struggles are. Where will we do this? Do we just do this in the owner's office or in the general manager's office, or do we go up to the boardroom where it's a little more neutral setting and it's a working class? Where do we find the time? I understand the time is short, but this is very, very important. When do we do it? Do we do it after month end? Halfway through the month? I don't know. Some guys like to do one halfway through the month so that they can salvage the month. If the month is going sideways, they want to be able to salvage the month to try to make it a winner versus just letting it finish out as a loser month. So some guys do it at the end of the year, end of the quarter. You know, I don't know what the right way to go is, but it's end of the year is not near enough because you're not sharing the books enough with them. And now I've got some dealers I've been working with that they said, well, we don't share the numbers at all. Well, I'm going to tell you, that's really, really, really old fashioned. I don't know how you're going to get it. Well, they're just supposed to sell more parts over the counter or sell more whole goods and make sure the used is selling out the door. And I'm watching the numbers. So if there's something bad, I'll just let them know. Well, that's not working in this day and age. You've got to get these guys involved in these books. Got to let them know what the numbers are. The other question is, who can teach the metric to the employees? Not always does the department manager or even the owner understand the metrics enough to teach to other people. So you might have to get somebody from the outside to come in and explain it, because when somebody that doesn't know tries to explain it, I think it's just a mess waiting to happen. You need to have somebody that understands it, and maybe you just learn a few metrics at a time. I used to do this little exercise at work where we do every 2 weeks, we talk about one metric, because I went into a store where there was nobody understood metrics at all. And I'd write down absorption. I'd write down what the industry benchmark is. I'd write down the formula, what the cost of doing business study, what it was at, what we were at. And then I did a little paragraph. And so these were just one 8x11 piece of paper, exactly what that metric was. And then they would have a little Dewey Tang or a little binder, and they'd have all the metrics on these little pieces of paper. So if I wasn't there and they needed to read, well, what is absorption, or what is turns, or what is this? They could flip open that piece of paper and they could read it, and they still might have a few questions, but at least they got 80% of the understanding was on the piece of paper, and then we could explain it to them later. Next. Okay, let's go next. Kind of did that one. Oh, share the books. Train and explain. So what the metrics mean, that's what I mean by getting somebody in that understands what these metrics inside out, upside down, and maybe the owner does, and maybe there's somebody else. Maybe it's not always. Often I've seen a sales manager that understands some parts and service metrics better than parts and service managers. So he might go in and speak to these metrics, what they mean to the department, what the industry benchmarks are, you know, and this industry is just a mess for having multiple words or multiple descriptions for the same meaning or for the same metric. So when these guys are sitting there reading some magazine article, industry specific magazine article about saying a word about this or that, you know, absorption is a great one because there's 6 different ways to calculate it. So one guy might say we need 100%, we need 110, we need 80%. So some of these guys get confused and say, why is this article saying this? And why is that article saying that? And why are you saying this? And well, it's the same thing. It's just said in a different way, or the calculation is different, or whatever. They're leaving off a few numbers. They're adding a few numbers in there. And this happens in this industry all the time. So I've had dealers tell me they're getting 115% absorption rate, and they just giggle when they look at the cost of doing business and everybody else is getting 70. Well, we're blowing them away. They say, well, you are, but you're leaving out 1/3 of your expenses in your store are sales, and you're leaving 100% of those expenses out of the calculation. No wonder you're getting 115. You could get 150 even if you took out a few more expenses. That happens, and that's why you need somebody that needs to understand and train your people as to what these metrics are and what they mean and how to calculate them and what all the variances are. The other thing with that is now we want to talk about how we can improve that metric. How do we improve the top number? How do we improve the bottom number? And then the calculation was what makes the metric. But what steps can we do? It's one thing to know that absorption, a higher number is better, but what can a guy actually do? What can an employee actually do to improve that metric? So he's sitting there wondering, okay, what is my job? What is my role? What will I do to actually better the department, better the company? What actions can I take? And everybody wants to know. Most everybody wants to feel like the actions they're doing are actually improving something, because when they get to look at that absorption rate go up every month, they start to think, hey, this feels good. This job feels good. I'm quite enjoying this. I'm motivated. I'm engaged. This is how it's working. I'm moving this store along. I'm doing my share. I'm doing my part. Next, please. Empowerment. Empowerment's a funny one. You know, you got to empower these people. Then after you share the books and you train them on give them a little rope. Let them go for it. And most time, empowerment's a funny thing. If you don't give a guy empowerment, he will try to do a bunch of stuff behind your back and almost hide what he's doing. When I give a guy a lot of empowerment, he's in my office every day asking me, well, should I try this? Should I do this? Should I do that? I said, well, you're empowered to do that. You're empowered to run that department or do whatever you're doing. Go ahead and make some decisions yourself. When he has that kind of empowerment, he's almost coming back to me more than when he doesn't have any empowerment. So it's exactly opposite what you'd think. The guy that has no empowerment should be asking you all the time, and the guy that has empowerment shouldn't have to. But once he's empowered and being held accountable for those actions, he really wants to make a good decision because he knows you're watching, and you've empowered him with those decision-making processes or abilities. So he's got to step up, and now he's going to be coming and checking. I don't know if this is a good idea. And he might just sit there and vent and use you as a sounding board. And at least you can feel comfortable then as a manager saying, this guy is really thinking. He knows what's going on. He's really thinking through this issue, and I feel comfortable. And then you'll give him more empowerment. And maybe he needs a little coaching, and maybe he doesn't on something. But you need to be available for him, and you need to follow up with him and ask him how it's going. He wants to be asked. But hold him accountable. Show him the numbers. Show him what his decisions, how they're affecting the numbers. You know, even if they go down, that's okay. Not every decision. And there isn't one of us on this call that has made every decision right and didn't. You know, we've all made a bad decision and actually hurt the business a little. And the best action then is to quickly reverse that decision and get it turned around again. But that's just part of learning and growing. And I've seen a lot of the last year, we've seen a lot of young guys being empowered to change these stores and move them ahead. And they've got all these young ideas. And some of the senior guys are saying, that's great. Let's let them loose and try some of these new things. And some of the senior guys are saying, it's never worked like that in the past. Why should we try new ideas? We don't have to. We've held on this long for 30 years. We should just stay the same way we are. And that's where you lose your engagement, is when you're not letting these younger guys go for it and try a few things and see what happens and see what works. Next, please. And then after we go through this sharing the books, and we train them and we empower them, and then we got to pay on the results. And I'm not a big fan of paying on a specific result. Like we're going to give you a bonus if you go from 2 turns on used inventory to 2.5. Well, all that does is it drives a specific metric, which actually will hinder other metrics. And I've seen this done where they've paid exactly on that. So the sales manager goes and he sells a whole bunch of used units for 0 margin. So he hasn't made any margin dollars, but his turns are up to 3 and 4. So he gets his little bonus, which is all great, but there's no gross margin dollars in. So when you come up with these things, you've got to be thinking, okay, what's going to be the backside of this little promotion? And this is why I'm a bigger fan of paying on return on assets, because that's where the rubber meets the road. On return on assets, he's had to manage his expenses, he's had to manage his cost of sales, he's had to manage his revenues, and he's had to manage his inventory, because that's all those numbers combined add up to be your return on assets in that department or in that company. Now, if you don't do it that way, net income is another way. You know, I'm a big fan of combining the aftermarket, the parts and service departments into a group promotion or a group incentive, I guess. Can you reward the whole team? I believe that's more of the way to go. When you do individual incentives, you actually create a division often in your team or in your department, in your company, in your location. If you can get the whole department working for a common goal, you've got 4 or 5 people going in the same direction, pushing for the same thing, helping each other, watching, keeping their eye on the ball, you know, versus just one guy that's out for himself because he's going to get a little spiff if he can get this done. Next, please. Okay, commission plans, salary versus commission. You know, I've been at stores where they pay a salary. I'm not a big fan of paying a salary versus commission to salesmen, but I've been at stores where salaried salesmen are working every bit as hard all day long as a commission salesman. A dealership I was working with, he switched from salary to commission, and he had one of his best guys quit. And then he hired a guy who wouldn't work under salary, would only work for commission. And he was every bit as good as the guy that quit. So should he have kept the good guy at salary and tried to hire this other guy in commission? Maybe, I don't know. I can't figure out what motivates salesmen all the time, but the guy on salary, he just had a lifestyle that he wanted his $80,000 a year, and that's all he needed. And he'd work day in and day out and weekends and never took a vacation. And he'd be out there setting bailers and doing this and after hours and no complaint at all. He got his $80,000. He said, that's the job I'm paid to do, and I do it. And in the wintertime, I might work a little less because there's just not as much to do. In the summer, I go like stink. And so that was great. And I said to this guy, I said, you might be able to make more money on commission. He says, I don't need more money. He says, I've got lots of money. House is paid for. Land is paid for. Got the land rented out. I got lots of income. 80 grand is happy. My wife's working in town. Kids are all grown up. And just leave me at this. And I couldn't argue with him. He was going like stink. And so I don't know which is the best way to go, but I do know that for the most part, commission salesmen will sometimes bust their hump a little harder than others. Now, I have seen commission salesmen not bust their hump at all. They just sit there and still play cards, even though they should be out digging up deals or going through or using the phone in the wintertime and phoning guys, and because half of them are in Phoenix all winter. And so I guess there's pros and cons to each of these different ways to pay, but primarily every sales plan that's in this industry is based off of 3 different types: percent of gross margin, percent of cash difference, or a salary or a guarantee or whatever you want to call it. And we've all put our little different, those are the 3 primaries, and then we've all spun our little different special ways of doing it based off of those 3. Next, please. So off the cost of doing business survey, no, inventory turns from 2012 at 3.25 down to 2018 at 1.9. And of course, assets from 3 down to 1.7. It goes without saying that inventory, whole goods inventory, is our largest asset in the company, because the other assets are made up of, a few parts and some rolling stock and some trucks and trailers and parts and shelves and desks, and then not a whole bunch of value, but the inventory is our biggest. So as inventory turnover goes down, asset turnover is going to be dragged down with it. Now, I was looking at this earlier, and I'm saying in 2012 and 2013, some of us said that's our best years ever. We've never seen anything like it. It was unprecedented, and we were still only getting 3.25 and 3.0. That's barely benchmark. I've seen benchmarks on new inventory turns or inventory turns at 3.5. So whichever you want to use. But anyways, in our best years ever, we were only getting benchmark or close to benchmark. And then, of course, it's just gotten worse from there on because we run into some tough years. Now, if we're ever going to cash flow these organizations, and it's going to get tougher to cash flow every year, it gets a little tougher to cash flow things. Money gets tighter. Manufacturers got different rules. We got all these messy negotiations with these overseas countries that we don't know what's going on. We got steel tariffs. It doesn't get any easier, but we can control our turn. So we need to improve our turn, and what we do to improve our turn is make some decisions on how we're going to do that. Now, I'm not sure, this is a big one for all of us because this is where our cash is tied up, and we've got used aged iron, we've got new aged iron, we've got price increases coming at us. We've got these lease returns are all dumping onto the market. We're trying to buy them and turn them fast. They're all opportunities for us to help us improve our turnover. But how do we do it well? Let's go to the next one, please. We get our salesmen, our whole good salesmen. We need to get their behaviors in line with what's in the best interest of the dealership. And that's why we talked, the first half of this webinar, we talked about, what gets them engaged. Now that we've got them engaged, what behaviors do we want? And anytime we drafted up a procedure, we always thought about what behaviors do we want this specific individual or this department or these people in the department, what behaviors do we want them to have in order to improve that department or that whatever we're going for. So we didn't design the procedures without actually assessing the behaviors that we wanted to drive. And the reason you do that is, I've heard Dr. Larry Cole say this 100 times, if we want to change a behavior, we change a procedure or a policy. Very few people will change their behaviors on their own. The only ones that do are the ones that have hit rock bottom. An alcoholic that needs to dry up because he's going to die and he'll never see his grandkids again. So those guys sometimes, once they hit rock bottom, will change a behavior. But for most of us, we don't change our behaviors unless a procedure is put in front of us. And we do it with the tax man every year. Every year, the government changes our little tax laws. So we change our behaviors to try to figure out how we can benefit ourselves. And I don't know if they don't think about it or don't understand that, but every year, everybody's changing their behaviors to beat the tax man on these crazy rules that they come out with every year. You know, so it's the same as driving with a cell phone. When I was a kid, we didn't have to wear a seatbelt, and then all of a sudden the government come up with the laws that said we had to wear a seatbelt. So, and if you didn't, you got a big old fat fine. So we all started wearing seatbelts. They changed our behavior by a fine. Cell phones are the same thing. If you talk on a cell phone while you're driving, you get a big old $300 ticket. So we've all changed our behaviors. We've either gone to these Bluetooth things or done the automatic thing, or we don't. Some of these phones they can sense when your car is driving, so they don't ring while you're driving. But we need to design the behaviors, or to draft the behaviors that we want. Next, please. So to get the salesman engaged in selling more iron, this is, next, please. What we get to get them to sell more iron, this is what we wanted. This is the behaviors we wanted. We wanted an urgency on the salesman to sell all trades in under 60 days. And the reason for 60 days was 60 days would give a dealership 6 turns a year. So every 60 days we're selling our average. Not everything's going to sell in 60 days. We're not crazy here. Some of them sell in 5 days and some of them sell in, 85 days. But on average, we'd like them to sell in 60 days so that we end up with 6 turns a year on our used equipment. Now we want to also avoid taking the hard to sell trades. And hard to sell doesn't mean they're oddball, high hours, and cowboy tough. That doesn't mean it. I got a dealer here that I've worked with, and he had an opportunity to take a big square baler on trade, and he had to say no to the guy. He says that's not an item that we sell. It's not an item we're familiar with. It's not an item that sells in this market. You're the only guy in this market that owns one of those things, and now you're trying to trade it off to us. We don't have anywhere to go with it. We can't take that. So that's a hard to sell trade. Even though it was it had hardly been used, because the guy figured out, he bought it with this great idea that he was going to use it and make big square bales, and it sat in the shop for 3 years and never been used. So it's a 3-year-old with only 1 year's use on it. So is it hard to sell trade? It was a terrible sell trade for him. He was never going to sell it, so he didn't want to buy it. Salesmen need to be eyeballing that and having that conversation with the customer, and not saying to the customer, oh, I'll go see if my manager will take it. We don't need that coming through the door. We need the salesman right off the get-go to say, oh, that's not a popular item in this area. I don't think we'll be able to take it. Now, is there opportunities to get out of that thing? Maybe the manager you still take the information. Maybe the manager will have a jockey or a wholesaler in his back pocket, or maybe he's got a dealer friend somewhere else that takes that type of product and does well with it. So maybe you can wholesale it right out to somebody else and you can still get that deal. It's just that you're not going to park that unit on your yard with nowhere to go with it. Now, desirable trades. This is what every salesman's dream is, to have a yard full of desirable trades where they're all looking juicy and cherry and beautiful. But I see a lot of dealers just sitting, waiting for waiting for the phone to ring, and whatever trade is thrown at them, that's what they're going to park in their yard. And we don't want that. We want the salesman to out digging in yards saying, I'm going to sell you this new piece right now because in 3 years, I need that back on trade because we know it will be desirable. That's what we need on trade. So you're going to own this thing for 3 years and we're going to come out here with a smoking deal and spin you out of it. That's the kind of stuff you want to be setting those kind of programs up. And that's what the salesmen do. They want you want a yard full of desirable trades because they'll drive from miles and miles away to buy these things. And they're easy sales, and you can usually make some pretty good gross margin dollars because you're the only guy with these desirable trades. And you start getting a reputation and that ugly phone call. The reason salesmen don't do follow-up phone calls, number one reason they don't do follow-up phone calls is they don't want to phone a guy who bought a used piece and now that you called, this tire went flat and hydraulic line is leaking and this and this and this, and well, there's no warranty on that thing, sir. What do you want me to do about it? Number one reason salesmen don't phone back to a customer on a follow-up call is because of that, getting that. So if you had desirable trades, he phones the customer. He says, yeah, I'm loving this thing. It's working just perfect for me. Thank you, sir. Spread my name around town and let them know if you need anything else. I'll be happy to help you. Next slide, please. So here's the other ones. Desired behaviors. These are what we want. We want them to pre-sell the trades. I mean, isn't that a beautiful world when the guy comes in, the salesman comes through the door with a new sale, and then he's got the used piece of paper and he's got the used check right there too. Here's the new one, here's the used one, here accounting, it's all done. We're out of this deal. We've pre-sold the trade to a neighbor. We've collected 100% of the cash. There's no floor plan. There's no nothing. The gross margin dollar made on this is actually gross margin dollars. It's coming cash coming into the store once we clear off our note with the manufacturer. You know, and I've seen lots of pre-sales, like big pre-sales where your combines, four-wheel drives, high clearance sprayers, tillage equipment or planting equipment, where guys, there'll be 6 or 8 months before these things show up. And I was talking to a dealer the other day and said, well, we don't even start thinking about selling those pre-sale, those trades. We know they're coming in, but the new one isn't coming for 6 months. So we won't even start talking to customers about that until that new one comes in. And I'm thinking, you've got 6 months to warm up the market on on that potential piece coming in. Why aren't you out there digging up deals and trying to figure, well, every excuse in the world why they're not doing it. We don't have people that will buy those without looking at them. Well, you can still look at them. You can show up to a guy in a different customer shop, you know, and you can take them over there and they can visit, especially if it's a beautiful yard. Everybody wants to buy a piece from a beautiful guy. Everybody wants to buy the little old lady's car that's only been driven to church on Sundays. Everybody wants those. So why can't they start pre-selling the trades? That's a behavior we want. And I was sitting at a salesman's desk the other day, and I could have reached over and stroked him in the head. He took a phone call in front of me from a customer, and the customer told him what he wanted, and the salesman said, well, we don't have anything like that in stock right now, sir. Thank you. And he hung up. And I said, what was he looking for? He said, well, he's looking for about a 120 horse tractor, but we don't have any of those right now. I said, do you ever get them? Oh, we get them all the time. And I said, you didn't get the name and the number of that guy? Well, we don't have any right now. So he can just call back when we do get one. Boy, that salesman, that was a stupid decision. I can appreciate if he doesn't get his name and his number on something that maybe they're never going to have, something that's way out of there. Some guy's phoning from a million miles away. I ask him, just trying to fish around. But to hang up on a guy that's looking for a 120 horse tractor when that's in your wheelhouse, why would you not get that guy's name and number? Because you could probably, somebody in that store is dealing on a 120 horse tractor. Maybe you could pre-sell somebody else's trade. But I've seen way too many salesmen hang up on a guy because they just don't have anything like that in stock right now. Improve marketing skills to complement selling skills. These are all salesmen's behaviors that we really wanted to drive, guys. And what's the difference between a marketing skill and a selling skill? A selling skill is just doing your 6 steps to the sale or your 9 steps to the sale, 7 steps. I've seen it 10 different ways to Sunday. But marketing skills, the easiest way to describe that is taking those good photos for marketing purposes. You know, when they do an appraisal on a unit, there's a set of pictures for doing appraisal that show all the marks and the nicks and the cracks and the cracked window and the poor tire. And then there's a set of photos that the salesman need to take that show this thing is a beautiful picture, you know, in all 4 corners and after it's all washed up and stuff, which I can't hardly get a salesman to take great photos to do the marketing part of it. And they need to get more engaged on taking those photos about marketing and writing up whatever description they want. The most important, the 3 or 4 most important features need to go in your ad first, you know, and it might be that, you know, an 80 horse tractor, the most important feature is it's only 500 hours and it's 10 years old. That might be the most important feature. It might be the most important feature that it's a 40 horse tractor with a cab. So it has cab. That's an important feature. Those are marketing skills that salesmen need to recognize and get really good at portraying to the marketing department that get this on the description first. These are the things that are going to make this sucker sell and get us phone calls. Bad trades. You're not going to do as much business as we do without making mistakes. We're going to take some bad trades. But how do we get the reps, the sales reps, salesmen, to sell these things without complaining? Because they always want to spiff. Now, the reason it's a bad trade is because they took it wrong in the first place, or they give us a bad appraisal, or we didn't know that the transmission was going clunk, clunk, clunk. And so we take this thing as a dealership, and then all of a sudden it's sitting there in the yard a year later, and we need to blow it out, and we're going to sell it for a $20,000 loss. And the salesman says, I want to spiff. And you say, well, I just paid you a whole bunch of money to sell the new one and take this trade, and now you want me to give you a spiff because of the mistake we made? Like, that just drives me nuts that, you know, I've got to pay him twice for the mistake we made off the first place. But how do we get him to stop complaining about that? Next, please. And this is our last page here. These are the other behaviors. Reduce the trades in a series, which every time this stuff goes up another 100 grand, we get another layer of trades. And it used to be there was 3 to 3.5 combines underneath each new combine sale, and now it's gone up to 4 to 4.5. So how do we get out of that last? How do we reduce that one? Nobody wants to take that $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 combine on trade. We want to reduce the number of trades in a series. The other thing that's happening now is we've got some manufacturers that have growing their horsepower and their tractor ranges up to 150, 160 horse when they used to only play in the 80 horsepower market. Those guys are taking some trades that they've never taken before, taken more trades than they've had to, because a lot of 160 and 70 horsepower tractors, a lot of hay tools have trades. And so these dealerships are now entering a realm where they've never really had to play that serious in, and taking some trades that are more dangerous than the type of trades they used to take in the past. And most of those dealerships had a commission, or they have a commission structure, which aren't addressing the trades, or aren't leaning towards moving the trades out fast enough, because they always took they took trades that were 60, 70, 80 horse, 30 horse, 20 horse trades. Well, those trades, they sell all day long, and they sell real fast and real easy. And it's really easy to work out of a mistake. A 30 horsepower tractor that you made $1,000 or $2,000 mistake on isn't nearly the loss as what 150,000 or 150 horsepower trade is. It could be a $15,000 or a $20,000 error on that. So how do we reduce the number of trades in a series? Commissions. It's all fun to play these big commissions on these guys, but we're not actually paying them on gross margin dollars. We're paying them on gross margin dollars that are on paper. That's paper money, because we don't really actually make any money on this stuff until the last trade is sold. And so by the time we do that, we might have paid a little too much, a little too much, a little too much on the first 3 pieces, and then all of a sudden you have to take this big old loss on the last piece. And so as a store, your gross margin dollars are X number of dollars, and you only want to pay 25% of that, let's say, but you've actually paid 45% of that because you paid too much gross margin dollars on the first 3, and then you had to take your lump at the end. And then this is a huge one for me. Every new and used unit in a series is equally important. How is that? The used unit is every bit as important as the new unit, and the new unit is every bit as important to use, because you don't get one without the other. So a new unit might cost a couple $100,000, but so what? Is it more important than the $50,000 trade that's got all our cash tied up in it? And if that trade sits there for 2 or 3 years and doesn't sell, which is more important, that new piece or the used piece? The new piece always has a value. The new piece can transfer out. The used piece often, if it's bought wrong, doesn't transfer out well. But a new piece, the manufacturer can throw programs at it. So which is more important, the new sale or the used sale? They're equally important in my world. Now let's go to, so with all these behaviors that we wrote out that we wanted the salesman to act like, or that we wanted the desired behaviors in the salesman, then we drafted up this commission structure. Next, please. It moves iron. We backloaded 100% of the commissions, and we don't pay any commission until all the units in a series are retailed. We'll go through a deal. Next, please. So stay on the left side of the page here, fellas. The current method is, let's say the retail's 100 grand, and then the wholesale and the trade, we're going to buy it at 60,000 bucks. We break even at 40. We add $10,000 gross margin. The customer is different. It's $50,000. He gives us $50,000. Now we paid 60 for this trade. We didn't do any recon. Let's say, make it easy. We sold the trade for 66. So we made 6,000 over on the trade, and we made 10,000 over on the new piece. 16,000 gross margin dollars come in the store. Now the backloaded method, this is how it works. We retail the piece for $100,000, but we don't show $10,000. We actually take that $10,000 gross margin and we backload it to the trade. So we don't buy the trade at 60, we buy it at 50. So it's on the books at 50. Now, when we sell it still for $66,000. And this is where some dealers get in trouble, is they don't have good controls on a good system and saying, no, the trade sells at 66,000, because a lot of salesmen will say, oh, we only paid 50 for that, let's go sell it for 55. Well, that's the sales manager's fault. He should have a good control in the organization where, no, yeah, we paid 50,000 for that item, but we're going to sell it for 66, and we still end up with 16,000 gross margin dollars. So we end up with the same amount of money. Go to the next slide, please. So we pay 25% gross margin dollars. You can see that here. The first deal was $2,500. The second deal, the salesman got 15. Total commission was $4,000. The new and used gross margin deals, when we backloaded it, we still had $16,000. We paid 25%, same as the other side, the current method, the proposed method, $4,000 in gross margin, but we split that equally between the two selling salesmen. So if salesman A sold a new one and salesman A sold the trade, sold his own trade essentially, he got all the money. But let's say he worked with another salesman, well, they just split it 50-50 because that's just how it worked. And the new one wasn't more important than the used, and the used one didn't happen unless the new one brought it in. So they just split it 50-50, but it does drive behaviors that you want to see. These guys are really tracking what they're selling and how fast they're selling it, because all their money is tied up in those used pieces. And it is amazing how many guys come in, how many salesmen will come in and say, I got the new one sold and I actually got the used one sold. And they couldn't get it sold before in the current method, but in this new method, they were doing it all the time. And we've been doing this, we've done this since 2005 or 2006 is when we designed this, or a version of this. I got a lot of dealers doing this now. Some of them have just started doing it. One of them just started doing it on their power sports. They have a Polaris or Honda or one of those things on their quads and their sleds. Another guy only did this to try it out. He started doing it on his planting equipment just to see how it would go. And yeah, they all put their little tweak on it and they all put a little spin on it, and that's okay. I mean, however you want to do it. But I have played around with hundreds of different commission plans to drive the behaviors we want to see. And those 9 behaviors that I just listed off are the behaviors that will make a whole goods department perform like you've never seen. And you just got to get it started. And I know it's a scary thing to change a commission plan, but in a business that's so laden, an industry that's so laden with trades, and our cash is so much tied up in these trades, and dealerships are not going broke. They're actually running out of active working capital because all of it's laying out in the yard, and they're having to go to the bank to borrow more money just to make payroll because all their assets or all their cash assets are been used to pay for inventory. We've got to come up with a dump out the box, change it up, figure out how to do it differently, and let's get this thing going, because she's a tough world, and it's not getting any easier in this business. As this stuff grows in dollars, it's more expensive. It's a capital intensive business, the equipment industry is, and with the volume of trades we take, we need to figure out a different commission structure that drives salesmen to do what we want them to do or need them to do to make this work. Next, please. So we need to make a plan. Let's go to the next one. Next slide. What and why? So people ask me, how do we get something going? You've got to explain the what and the why as to how you're going to do it. I've had lots of dealers try to start this commission structure, and their problem is they don't know how to explain the what and the why they want to do it. They just say, this is how we're going to do it, and then it falls apart. You get pushback in when you have your staff meeting, the salesmen fight on you and threaten you and quit, and then they go home and they all, at night when they go home after a meeting like that, they're all texting or phoning each other and saying, that guy's an idiot, that manager's stupid, that'll never work. Let's go in and just draw a line in the sand and say, if he does it, we're all quitting. That's because it wasn't presented properly. If you present the what and the why well, then they'll start to say, oh yeah, we need those behaviors. That will actually help us. And with any employee, with anybody, it's almost always what's in it for them. What's in it for them? They want to know, how is it going to help them do their job better? How are they going to make more money doing it this way? That's what they want to see. So that's how you have to explain a lot more of the share, the train, all that kind of stuff with the numbers. Guys, this is how you will end up making more money faster, and this is what it's all about. The dealership's going to make more money. Granted, we're going to make more money, but you're going to make more money too, and it's going to be a lot smoother, easier transition to get sales done. Next slide, please. Next one. Let's go to the next one. So now, if we're going to do this, we want to make a plan. How do we do it? What objectives are important? How do we draw this up so that we can get the right objectives? What actions do we want to see? What activities do we want to see? Really, our whole goal is to hit the right ROA, return on asset, or the net income goal. But this should be done with the whole team. The whole team needs to understand this is part of the what and the why. If they know what our objectives are, they will work hard to hit it. We've just got to set up the procedures to do that, that they've got to understand the what and the why are we doing this. Next slide, please. Now, there is a lot of tracking because people want to belong to a winning team. And so your accounting department has to track a lot of these metrics because people want to see if it's improving or not improving, and are we doing it right, and take some time to review it and match performance against the targets and see if things are going well or not going well. And it's okay. I mean, not everything we do is going to work, and that's great. And that's how we learn. And the biggest failure in life is not to fail. It's to not try. That's a failure. It's to not try. You know, there's a stat out there that says for every 10 ideas you try, there's only 3 going to work, but you got to go through the other 7 to find out which ones are failures. Fortunately, most of us are in small business, and in small business, if we come up with an idea on Monday and we figure out on Tuesday morning it's not working, this is a dumb idea, we didn't think this through well, we're small business, we can just cancel it, change it, tweak it right now. That fast it can happen. We're not like government where they'll go on for 4 years before they realize this isn't a good idea, but they just can't change as fast as we can in small business. That's why North America is actually known as the small business capital of the world, because this is how we make things happen. Now, China's got into all that, and that's not where this webinar is going, but China's figured out, give all these people, let them work as a small business environment in a great big country, but still have communist control, the country works better. So small business is where it happens and where it's at, and that's what we can do. And that's what we can do with this making a plan. We can make smart plans, making dumb plans. We can try them and let them fail and see where they go. Next, please. Oh, that's not the right slide, but the other, is there another slide on there? Procrastination. Good thing, great things come to those who don't wait. I can't say enough about don't procrastinate. All of a sudden it's February. For some of you guys in the South, it's going to be springtime here in about 30 days. And for us guys in the North, in 45 or 60 days, we're going to be deep into it. And it's going to be springtime and we're just not going to have any time to do anything. So don't procrastinate. Get on it. Even if you only do a little bit, you've got to start doing something. But don't sit there and do nothing, because I go into dealerships all the time. We work with a lot of dealerships, and I ask them, what have you done? 2 years ago I was here. What have you done since I was here last time? And they'll say, I haven't done actually anything. Why? Well, just didn't have time. You didn't have time in the last 2 years. We don't have a huge amount of sales in the last 2 years. Things are slower. This is the time you got time to change. Just make time for it. One of the students in class told me, he says, if it's a priority, you will find time for it. And I was a great, he was just a student, and he made that comment to all the class, and nobody had to say anything, and he was right. If it's a priority, you will make time for it. You will find time for it. And with that, next slide, please. And with that, we'll move to the Q&A, and thank you everybody for joining us, and I hope you learned something, and I hope you'll try something. And I don't care if you try anything that I said, but I just hope you try something. Kim, is there any questions? I don't have a screen that shows me questions.
Yep, we have a couple in. First, we've gotten a few questions about being able to see a recording of the webinar. We have recorded it, and you'll get an email notifying you when that is available to watch again. All right, we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. So Trent, with the shared commission structure, what do you say to the salesman who complains about splitting it when one guy sold a $200,000 new tractor or a new item and the other guy sold a $35,000 trade?
Well, that's where it goes off to, I mean, they have to be trained that the new sale isn't more important than the trade. The trade is where all the money's tied up. That's where dealerships go broke. And if they start to understand how a Holgis department works, then they'll start to realize that, hey, there is a reason why these owners or these sales managers hammer on us to keep selling this trade. They just think it's just a bunch of money grubbing business, and they want the salesman to get out there and sell that iron. No, it's more than that. It's where the profit is made. It's where but we're not doing a good job at training salesmen. I did a class one time, and a guy had been in sales for 35 years, and he didn't understand that all the profit in a deal is lying in that trade out in the yard. And he's been in sales 35 years. So if he's been there 35 years, how many of the guys that haven't been there 35 years don't understand exactly how the cash flow works inside a Holgis department? So it's all about training.
All right. And then this will probably be our last one because we're tight on time. What's your take on manufacturer salesman bonuses? How should those be handled?
I never touch them. I let the salesman have it. When I do classes with salesmen, that's the biggest pain they have with the dealership they work at is they take their salesman bonus, and it's structured as the word salesman bonus, so they think it should be theirs. So I don't take it from them whatsoever, but in return, I won't touch it. But in return, if I have to go sell a trade, if you got to go out and sell me a trade that we paid $80,000 for, and you got to sell it for 80, or you got to sell it for 70 to take a loss, don't ask me to pay you a spiff on those ones that I asked you to sell and take our lumps on. I mean, I'm not going to pay a spiff. I won't touch your salesman bonus, but don't you ask me to have to pay you a spiff to move out our mistakes.
All right. Well, that is all the time we have for today. Like I said before, today's presentation and the audio will be made available on the Farm Equipment website in case you want to go back and review it. Keep an eye on your email and the Farm Equipment Daily Newsletter for more information. On behalf of Trent, the Western Equipment Dealers Association, Dealer Institute, and Farm Equipment staff, thanks for joining us for today's webinar. When you leave, there's going to be you'll be directed to a short survey. Please feel free to reach out and let us know your thoughts on the live event. And if there's any topics you'd like us to cover in the future, be sure to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.